Hey there. Thank you for having me back for the third time. I appreciate it. This is always a lot of fun. Thank you. Love Timeline JS too. That was a fun one. I'm going to just quick give us a roadmap of where we've been, where we are, and what's next. You all are probably pretty familiar with it, but the numbers are changing dramatically. That little spike at the top, up and down, is the last couple years where we've been right at 50% after the last few decades of not much popularity for this issue. And Colorado, Washington, and a few other states have helped lead the way here. Actually, 3 of our sponsor schools in Florida, Maryland, and Missouri have programs as well, some that are going online to affect in one way, shape, or form. But this map is changing vastly, and by the end of this year, we only have 11 states left with total prohibition. A quick history of where we've been at. I'm not going to bore you with every single one. There's some great writing on this. A lot of this comes from Bruce Barcott's Weed the People, which is my textbook for this class. He did a great job writing this stuff up. But we can turn the lens a little bit on ourselves there in the 30s there when we started Reefer Madness, and we can say that ourselves, the media, had a little bit to do with what's been going on for much of the 20th century with the marijuana policies in America. And it's all thanks to my good friend Harry Anslinger, who was the first Federal Bureau of Narcotics chief. After those 13 years of alcohol prohibition, the nation came to its senses, and then it was like, what's next? The scourge of the earth is marijuana, and it was really the drum beat hard from his office, and he was the one who helped passed the Marijuana Tax Act, which was this very sort of bipolar bill that you had to register to get a stamp to sell cannabis, but then you were violating federal law. It's pretty awesome the way they wrote that legislation. But then really things come to a head in the 70s with the Controlled Substances Act, and then the Drug Enforcement Agency being formed. During that time, there was a very unknown commission called the Schaefer Commission that came out and studied cannabis. It was sponsored by Nixon. He got the report. He said, I don't really like this report. We're going to just dump this one. And the buddy who ran it, who's going to get a federal judgeship, never got that federal judgeship. And we've had both legislation and research on the books for decades from pharmacists, physicians saying this is not that big of a deal. But the federal government has always scheduled it as a Schedule I in the 70s. And then we have some of the social justice issues that I'm most interested in with my class and getting my students to understand during the 80s with mandatory minimum sentencing and the 3 strikes. But really for Colorado, 2009 was the big year when the Department of Justice wrote what's known as the Ogden Memo. There have been a couple that have followed up since then, but that was when the Department of Justice said, listen, we're going to be a little bit hands-off on this. And that's when the Wild West really started in Colorado with a lot of home grows and the new medical program that was starting. And then, of course, 2012 historic votes in Colorado and Washington. I'm most focused on Amendment 64 because that's what impacts our daily life in Colorado the most, including the town where I live. So anyway, we're gonna take a little bit of credit for this, right? Like we sort of helped this along by being complicit with Hearst and all the yellow journalism. Hearst and Anslinger were buddies. Of course, there was some collusion with the paper industry, right? And and there's a big race aspect to it. I'll talk a little bit about that in the very end. But we've gone a long way. We've gone from this being this demagogue and this problematic thing to right now, this is the best stuff you can get on the market, right? This stuff that's branded, and we've really changed the packaging and the sensibilities around this product. This agricultural commodity has, in my lifetime, I never thought this would happen. I'm a relatively young person, but to see this kind of stuff on the shelves being funded by venture capital that's dumping millions and millions of dollars into this, it's hard to deny. And even at the grocery store, Time and Newsweek are selling a lot of magazines with this, right? But it's funny because they can't take advertising for it because it's still against the law. But there's some great movements, specifically these 2 young women here from Women Grow. They've helped change the conversation around cannabis. They're a group in Colorado and now a national group. And of course, Willie Nelson, he has a branded product of his own, but he's really concerned with big pharma, basically, right? So Willie's doing his part too. And again, we have billions, that's with a B, of revenue to climb, of course, another billion by next year. And a lot of it is being funded by venture capitals. This is a group actually in Colorado, Canopy Boulder. Privateer Holdings is one of the largest. They fund Marley Natural, among others. There's your Shark Tank, the Marijuana Show, and the ArcView Group. They're dumping in lots of money. They have a lot at stake, too. What's happening in Colorado, though? Amendment 64, like I said, and it's opening up the Petri dish. Colorado itself is divided from rural to urban to the mountain towns to the affluent communities. That green, of course, is said go. and red said no, right? But it's hard to deny this. Even in my own town, we have a moratorium. We can't sell the product in the city of Longmont, but right there next to the train tracks in an unincorporated piece of county land is a dispensary. Ride by it on my bike all the time, right across the street from a park, not far from a charter school, right? So, I mean, even in these towns, there's sort of this disconnect, right? But we're regulating it like alcohol, and we're bringing in the coin. It's been great. $1 billion in tax revenue. That's a roundup of a few million there, but that's up $300 million from last year. Still waiting to see those stories, though, trickle in from where that revenue is going. That's one to watch for sure. But I come here on the heels of a very important documentary that just came out on Friday, released. It's called Rolling Papers, and it tracks Ricardo Baca, the world's first mainstream marijuana editor. And this is a famous picture, Jake Brown. He's the strain reviewer. He's like a sommelier of cannabis, and he smokes weed and writes about it. And he's a YouTube star. And it's funny too, right? But he's one of many. And from Seattle to Washington, people are doing this. But the cannabis itself, the Denver Post has serious money and a stake in this because even their editorial pages are dropping and they're not writing in-house editorials. But cannabis is driving the conversation. This list here, I'm going to just blow through it. These are the main issues that I'm concerned about. Like I said, pesticides has been leading the way quite a bit. Banking issues, there's a story in the Sunday Times just about it as well. I mean, you can't file taxes, you can't write this stuff off. Marijuana businesses pay a 70% effective tax rate on what they do. It's not a place to actually make money. It's a place to dump a lot of money. But how can you all help your students? This is the last 30 seconds, is how do you deal with consumption? There's adult use and there's recreational. There's the political aspect. The business, like I said, there's money going into it. Culture, how does this impact just daily life? How do we talk to our kids about it? Science, the Cannabis Genome Project is a big one. Excited for their research and enforcement. I'm going to quick say this is our language on cannabis. Only one of these is dangerous. That's marijuana. And cannabis is becoming the accepted term. And you're going to have to get lucid on this vocabulary. There's a bunch in there, but I'm out of time, and thank you very much. And lastly, from the NPR himself, the agricultural reporter says, avoid cliches and puns, and keep looking to see what's happening this next election cycle. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.